a goal, Quishbilly Huddersfield Town! The most famous goal of Quishbilly's life.
Is this the moment for Lee Fowler? It is. Take your place in Division 2, Huddersfield Town.
Thank you.
And Steve Simonson's boots now. He's missed. Steve Simonson clears the frame of the goal and collapses in a heap of tears. Huddersfield Town are promoted.
Mustafa Schindler has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
This is the greatest and best pod in the world. Tribute. A long time ago, me and my brother Jonny here, we were podcasting on a long and lonesome night. All of a sudden, there shined Danny Kirrane in the middle of the pod. And he said, welcome to episode 155 of the Andy Takes That Chance podcast. Episodes in defeat are about as welcome as a return of Jeremy the Whopper with the Whistle Simpson. And we're a little bit short on numbers this week. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Guys, if you're not going to watch the games, you won't be on my podcast. I'm not here to be anyone's friend. There's that, and also, to tell the truth, I ballsed up massively yesterday. So we had ready to go Danny Kirrane, who was excellent as always on the podcast, and I queued up Richard Cosmala's Mark Fotheringham impression into Wirecast, and for some reason Wirecast has decided to loop Cos's wonderful impression for 65 minutes over the podcast. So here we are again, recording for take 2. Jonny, hello. A good place to start,
Hello.
I think, would be Mark Fotheringham's presser last week. We talked about it on the podcast last week, and things like this are sort of catnip, aren't they, to Huddersfield fans? You've got Mark Fotheringham talking about what it means to be, to pull on a Huddersfield Town shirt. All these little sound bites which get fans excited, don't they? The only sort of angle that wasn't covered last week was what sort of impression this could leave on senior players, because obviously Mark Fotheringham, we'll probably talk about in a little bit, is obviously not the most experienced of head coaches. He's done little bits, hasn't he, and little bits as assistant, and learnt from some of the best, as he'd say. But how would, just throwing this out there to you, how do you think sort of some of the senior pros maybe thought about him not so much hanging individuals out to dry, but he was quite adamant, wasn't he, that if you coast, you're not going to play, my team, and it doesn't take an idiot, does it, to put 2 and 2 together and start coming up with names?
No, it doesn't. I think he's fortunate in the fact that the senior players that he's got in the squad are all quite of the old school footballer mould. Do you know what I mean? They are. You look at the Tom Lees, Johnny Hoggs, Danny Wards, John Rose to a certain extent, and I kind of probably throw Matty Pearson into there as well. They are kind of the work hard, put the time in, put the effort in. Do you know what I mean, live and die on the pitch once you cross the white line? That's it type of players. Even John Rose is slightly different very different to a Johnny Hogg. He's still, do you know what I mean, he's a manager's dream. Everyone who speaks so highly of him, and I think kind of what Fotheringham's demanding, they will naturally give, which I think is lucky for Fotheringham, because you're quite right. Certain senior players who don't necessarily want an easy ride, but probably aren't or can't maybe put 100% in for every single training session 5 days a week, and might just want to take a little bit of time off, not off the pitch, but just time off and giving 100%, might start to kind of butt heads with that a little bit, or maybe disagree with it. There's certainly players that have been senior players at Huddersfield in the past, through different managers who've had a similar approach, that have bombed out the squad, and it's the last we've seen of them. So it can sometimes be difficult. There's not a lot of years in between some of these players and Fotheringham as well. And without being a major player, do you mean like a big name player wise, and not too many years of coaching under his belt as well, sometimes that can sometimes it lacks that bit of credibility to come in and make big decisions and big statements. But I think he's fortunate with the players that he does have at the football club, that those players in question are probably types of players that actually will quite like that, and will probably be wanting to demand that of the players. I noticed in his press conference, potentially post-match or pre-match, Rotherham, he actually mentions by name Johnny Hogg and certainly Matty Pearson being a big part of the team at the moment. He's having one-on-one meetings with them and asking them what the thoughts are. So obviously he values those older pros as well. So I think for the time being, it will be okay. I think, do you know what? There's a couple of younger lads who might need to learn a little bit from the old pros. I think they'll be on board with his message. Personally,
he's also, because obviously we're re-recording this, and he's mentioned in his press conference this morning that anybody who makes individual errors leading to goals is going to get dropped as well. So that there's a few sort of harsh truths coming from Mark Fotheringham at the minute, and maybe the squad needed this.
Yeah.
Maybe the squad needed it. But
yeah.
I think he might also need to be a little bit careful in not alienating some members as well, because there's two ways to go about it, isn't there? There's the Danny Schofield approach of trying to be he seemed to be too nice, I think, and too laid back maybe, and maybe Mark Fotheringham's coming the other way with a sledgehammer behind the scenes. We don't know, because obviously we don't see what's going on inside, do we? But there's certainly a couple of different approaches we've seen from Mark Fotheringham so far, which has given us an insight into maybe the character that he is. But let's talk about the game, because I just found that was interesting. I don't think there's anything right or wrong yet on that, but you could see it backfiring, but you can also see it working. So I'm just kind of sat back, as football fans do. We just kind of sat back and, if it works, we'll say well done. If it doesn't, we'll tell him he's a whopper. That's what we do, isn't it? But it's interesting, and it'll be an interesting ride. But let's talk about the game, Johnny. You were there in the away end. Town made quite a semi-decent start, didn't they, to this 3-5-2 system. Two strikers up front, Wards and Road, Dwayne just behind. And Town looked to hit on the counter, looked to soak up those diagonals and then break out through one of the strikers had come short and play Sorber in round the corner, wouldn't they? And then a bit of inexperience, if you like, from David Kasumu. I know he's 23 and played 100 games, but he's sort of dwelled on the ball, hasn't he? Found himself tackled. It's a good tackle. And then Tom Lees has maybe just for a split second found himself ball watching in the back three, and he's drawn a little bit to watching the ball, isn't he? And that's all Connor Washington's needed, just to peel off him. And Dan Barlaser sounds much better, doesn't it? Especially with he's such a good passer.
Sounds a bit more fierce.
Yeah. I'm going to call him Barlaser from now on. But he finds Connor Washington, who sticks that in the top corner, and no keeper in the world's going to save that, are they? It's a frustrating start, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because I thought, we weren't incredible, but I thought we started relatively well. We did try to control the game a little bit. We were a little bit careful with our passes. Passed it on the back in a positive way. Seemed to be Nakayama was a bit more of the out ball, looking to get into Rose's feet. We were playing to the midfield pair, Kamara, Kasumu, or Turner looked to play it to more than likely Thomas himself. But a few times that worked. We see these before the game. We see them looking to move the ball quickly before they start a game. I know we touched on it before, and that is working. Those quicker players are coming off. It's clearly working on the training field. That is coming into the game. So there were some positives. We got him out a couple of times. Rhodes had a good chance, which, like I said, the ball was slightly further in front of him, or he kind of got his foot around it. He probably would have done better on different days. So it was disappointing when the goal against came. And again, it's just those mistakes. It's just that bit of an experience maybe from Kasumu. Maybe trying to do the right thing, maybe trying to do what he's been told to do, which is find the pass. But for me, in those situations, it's reading the danger and getting rid of the ball. And then again, Lee's kind of a little bit caught. Maybe he's trying to think, I could press and get there, but really kind of leaves a gap then, which Washington finds. And like you said, no, it's a good finish. And I think that's his first goal in quite a while, actually. Doesn't look it because it looks quite assured. 13th. Yeah, an assured finish, and Nichols has got no chance. But the good thing, the positives to take out of it is that we don't fall into the trap of teams, second bottom, and well, that's it. That's the game over. We do actually keep pressing and get a goal back quite quickly, which is obviously positive. But yeah, there were good positives from that start. It's just a shame that a little bit lack of concentration, a little bit of experience cost us, really, in those first 20-25 minutes.
like you say as well, it's a good response from Huddersfield Town. A lot of teams at the bottom do start sulking, don't they? And the shoulders start sloping. I think I watched a little bit of Hull against Birmingham, and Hull are in a real rut at the minute. And as soon as things go wrong there, they really sort of go off the boil. But we didn't. Sorba Thomas, with a free kick gets deflected over. I always find it really strange. Gary Roberts as well. I find it really strange when people like Sorba Thomas and Gary Roberts can take corners and they can put it on somebody's eyebrow, from the corner flag, pretty much perfectly, but they can never sort of strike a free kick on target. I don't think I've seen Sorba put one on target yet, and Gary Roberts never did.
You think it should be a lot easier?
I'm sure he'll get there. Yeah. I'm sure he'll get there. It's just a funny quirk, isn't it? But Sorba Thomas then, excellent corner, another assist for him. He's playing himself right back into form at the minute, and there's a lot of effort going in with Sorba as well, which is great at the minute. His ball to the near post. As you said yesterday on Take One of the podcast, it's a carbon copy almost of the Nottingham Forest situation where Danny Ward went far post with that time and it got blocked. This time it goes near post, and it's a well-worked goal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's good to see. I mean, straight off the training ground, Fotheringham said that. He said that Narcissus had recognised how they defend set pieces and has come up with a way to try and counter that, and it's obviously coming to fruition, which is good to see. So it's good that the training ground is reflected on the pitch, and obviously all the players listening to what they've been asked to do. But yeah, it was a good goal. Good finish by Danny Ward. Again, another great assist from Sorba. But it's nice to see. We've still got something from last season, which is a danger from set pieces, especially corners.
Yeah, we've not really. I'm trying to think. Have we scored from open play really with Mark Fotheringham? I'm trying to remember the two Hull goals. 2 goals against Hull. I obviously remember it.
Yeah, it depends.
Very memorable. Just trying to think of them now. There's like phases, aren't they, of set pieces as well.
Yeah, it depends how far you go back, Jimmy, or how far you go along before you call it kind of open play, really. Because I mean, Hellick's goal isn't really. It's kind of phase 2 or phase 3, isn't it? So.
Yeah. And Kamara was also a little bit. Well, I suppose Kamara, you can give that more open play, can't you? But,
yeah, I'd say that was more open play.
Yeah, which is fine. But yes, I think Town's attacking from open play is certainly something for debate at the minute. And the XG wasn't particularly good, was it, on the day? An XG of 0.4.
Just over 1, I think.
I've got.
Was it? I thought it was just,
I've gone with Infogol. Infogol and who scored might be different, but they've got them at 0.47. Rotherham's just over 1 on the day. Which is surprising, given some of the chances and the way that Mark Fotheringham talked about some of the chances that we had in the press conference afterwards. And I agree with him to a point from rewatching it back as well. The game swung really at 1-1, didn't it, before Rotherham got the second, and Town were maybe in the ascendancy at this point. Sorba Thomas was at his best down the right-hand side. He's rinsed Lee Peltier a couple of times. Cozzy pre-match was just like, get Lee Peltier, he's 100 years old, etc., wasn't he? And Sorba's done that, and he's put a great ball in. Danny Ward's missed it. There's one in the first half, isn't there, where he's put a ball across. Jordan Rhodes has gone for a kind of flick, hasn't he? Like Ivan Toney scored last week. He's obviously been watching his Premier League highlights, and he just got a bit too heavy-footed with it, didn't he? And got it stuck under his feet, which was unfortunate. Jordan Rhodes has a goal disallowed, which I think comes to make it possibly 2-2, doesn't it, at that point? I can't remember. But Dwayne Holmes also on the follow-up from that Danny Ward chance where Danny Ward just fails to attempt it. And I do get where Mark Fotheringham is coming from, because Town got themselves in some promising situations and some promising positions, and Sorba's put some dangerous balls in, but it's just either not fallen for us, or the finish is off, or the timing of the run in Jordan Rhodes' case slightly off as well. But I've seen a lot of feedback, and to be honest, in the aftermath of a game, nobody's to coin another Mark Fotheringham word, another bingo word, clarity. Nobody's got the most clarity just after the game. Everybody's talking with emotion, and they're upset or they're overly happy, etc., aren't they, immediately after the game. But I think a lot of people after the game were saying, oh, Rotherham deserved this, they were miles better than us, we were absolutely useless, and I don't really buy into that. Now, I think when we'd lost, I was in a pretty bad mood. But now we've had a couple of days to reflect on it. I genuinely think it's this period of the game which has determined the winner. And Town are sort of in the ascendancy at this point, and we failed to score. If we go 2-1 up, I think we win the game and we deserve it. but we don't. And that is just typical of two championship teams toughing it out. We didn't look like a useless relegation outfit by any stretch. We didn't look a great outfit either. We just looked like one of those teams who has games like this, and sometimes they'll grab a goal and win it, and sometimes we won't and we'll lose. And I think Fotheringham's 4 games in charge so far are very sort of hit and missy mid-table kind of affairs, if you like, lower mid-table. And that's the way I saw it, really. And Town obviously didn't take those chances, and Rotherham went up the other end, and we'll talk about their goal in a second. But I thought Fotheringham's analysis was pretty accurate, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm a bit like you. I was in the car on the way home for the Fotheringham interview, and he kind of made a couple of points about the chances we created. And I instantly was thinking, what chances? There weren't any. Do you know what I mean? Coming through the lens of a team that's second bottom, it's like you say, if we're 9th, you go away a bit frustrated, then, well, we probably should have won that, or probably could have won that. We haven't. Rotherham, do you know what I mean, are also had their own chances, let's not forget. But okay, we move on. Because we're sat second bottom, everything seems worse. Everything's through the lens of being second bottom. But when you actually review the game and watch extended highlights, there are good chances. And Fotheringham talks a lot more around, we talked about this again last night, but situations to score over. It wasn't the fact that we had 4 or 5 shots on target that were all saved by a fantastic keeper, but there were chances created there where, like I say, on another day, the ball's a little bit further in front of Rhodes and he gets a good shot off, or the ball's still reasonable to Rhodes and he does a little bit better. The ball into Danny Ward's, again, near front post, get a touch on that, it goes in, no keeper's stopping that. And again, Rhodes is unlucky to come offside, but also I think, once again, I think Ben Jackson, I don't know, but it looks like he's kind of screaming to Rhodes to leave it, because he actually follows it up as well. And he can almost like goals like that.
It's amazing how quickly he got to that, considering there were about 6 players between him
really
and he
quickly.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing. It's like, were we ever in that game to win it? Well, yes, we were. And it's the way it goes sometimes. And I think because we are where we are, and we do need points, we can't keep saying, oh, it's nice to have had chances to potentially win a game. Absolutely. But look at the game in isolation and how long Fotheringham's been in tenure, and to kind of address that and look at that as a situation, we still are getting better. And I think if you evaluate that away game, because away games is something we've really struggled with this season, versus the Reading game, then there is a significant change, a significant improvement. So, yeah, you can kind of see where it's coming from if you look at it from that way and really kind of assess it and try and just remove the situation that we're currently in. So if we see a similar step change to our next away game, then hopefully we kind of those kind of chances more convert into goals and more clear-cut chances, and we'll continue to see improvement alongside cutting out errors, cutting out mistakes, and cutting out goals that probably shouldn't be happening as well, which is obviously key to that.
Yeah, and let's talk about the goal, which probably shouldn't have happened, and that's Rotherham's first shouldn't really have happened, but Rotherham's second probably shouldn't either. And do you know what? There's probably a Rotherham podcast going somewhere, oh, we need to defend a set piece better and we shouldn't have conceded to Huddersfield. So, it kind of works both ways. But it was kind of like classic championship, wasn't it, in that Rotherham, you don't take your chances and you pay the price kind of thing, wasn't it? And it's not a good goal to concede. And I think initially, me, you and Danny yesterday were looking at the goal and we were like, oh, why is Nakayama marking Wood? Wood's their main aerial presence. What on earth is going on there? And you watch it again, and you watch it again and again, like we did, because we're a bit nerdy like that. And it's actually quite clever from Rotherham in some ways. And the reason why it's clever is because they have the free kick. Dwayne Holmes, it's a silly tackle, gets booked, and he goes off having a go at Ben Jackson. And really, Dwayne's lost his head there and shouldn't really be lunging in like that. But there's still a situation then that you have to defend. So, I'm not saying that's Dwayne's fault by any stretch. But Rotherham have got this free kick, and Huddersfield look like they're going man for man on a lot of the Rotherham players, which is understandable. But what happens is Rotherham move the ball wide, and then it gets worked back to Barlaser. I'm sticking with Barlaser. And then he puts the ball back in. And at this moment, because Rotherham have switched play, if you like, Town seem to have reverted from man-to-man marking to a more zonal system. You see Tom Lees drops down into an area where people are going, what's Tom Lees doing there, marking nobody? And then Helik's quite central, and then Nakayama's on the left. So they've gone back into the shape. And there's more of an argument really here, not so much about someone should be marking that, but at what point do you shift between zonal and man marking, and how fluidly do you do this? And the ball, and if you watch the run from Wood, firstly, Wood is on, I think he's on like between Kamara and Helik. They seem to have him, which is fine. That's understandable. He put two big guys who are 6'3" on him, and that's, should be dealt with. But what Wood does is he kind of moves away, and he sits on the shoulder of Helik, but peels onto Nakayama, who's the weakest of our three defenders in the air. So Nakayama then has to pick Wood up in the zonal system, and George Kelly, who's come on, is with Helik. But then he moves out as another runner comes, second runner comes in. So Helik, being the one who senses the danger in the middle, picks up the second runner into the 6-yard box. Lees is zonal on the right-hand side, which then leaves nobody marking Kelly because he's gone out and back in. And it's not exactly Barcelona-style technical football. It's quite basic, but it's clever from Rotherham. We've obviously switched off. Kasumu should really deal with the cross. I know he's not 6 foot plus, but you'd expect or you'd hope David Kasumu gets a touch on that, and then it goes out for a corner and you reset. But when the ball comes over, Wood beats Nakayama. Nakayama's not going to beat Wood in a tussle. It's just not happening. Especially as he's still getting to grips with the physical aspects of the championship, which he admitted himself last week in the presser. Wood heads it down. Kelly's unmarked. Unfortunately, he doesn't handball it. It's chest, it's fine. And then he sticks it in the back of the net. Rotherham 2-1 up and go on to win the game. And it's difficult to point fingers at individuals for me on this, rather than Town have, this is something Mark Fotheringham's going to have to sort of look at, because I initially looked back at the Reading game and I thought, this is like Reading again, where Radoni's marking the centre back and he heads it in and Jordan Rhodes is on the post. That it's an organisation thing, but it's actually evolved a little bit. So you can see the improvements we've made. It's just that this next point is in the second and third phases. Do you stick man to man or do you flick zonal? And that's another decision, isn't it, that Mark Fotheringham's got to make really. And the key things like this and key errors are what. And stamping them out is really what's going to keep us in this league and what's going to relegate us.
Yeah, it is. And like I say, from taking the time to review it later down the line and review it a couple of times, it is the fact that is correct. What you're saying is correct. It's then, like you say, without having the luxury of knowing what the tactical game plan is for set pieces, it's hard to know who's to blame. Like I say, it's. Is it because a couple of players look like they're kind of sticking man to man? A couple of players look like they've dropped back into a zonal system. Who's wrong or who's right in that? Which it's not necessarily worked. And I think with a bit more time, or like obviously reviewing that and having luxury and to use that to improve going forward, improve set pieces in other games will help. But it's something that Town have got to look at and get sorted quickly. Like I said, things like that weren't happening last season. Now we've had a significant personnel change on and off the field, so okay, fair enough. But it does need to get looked at, because quite quickly teams will, if they're not already, looking to target that and looking to target second phase, third phase. Like I said, what Rotherham did wasn't anything too clever, too incredible, but it's worked. But the other thing for me is, I'd say throughout the entire game, the amount of times that players were able to get crosses in, which is far too easy. And again, before we even look at what's happening inside the box for that second goal, we've got 3-on-3 outside the box. And just before the ball comes in, the ball goes over to the corner flag. And the two players that are marking the guy who ultimately puts the ball in actually follow the ball. So the guy just plays it back away from the corner flag, and that's when the ball gets whipped in, and that's ultimately when everything starts to go wrong. So it's even basics before then. That two players run into one man. I mean, I'm sure your little lad won't do that. That's absolutely schoolboy. Two players to one man in that situation, leaving a play. So it's just everyone just getting back to basics and not making these mistakes. And to go on to what we were saying right at the start of the pod, if Fotheringham saying, if you make mistakes, you won't get in my team. Sometimes a little bit of pressure doesn't always help. And I think sometimes players can lose their heads and lose their abilities by feeling too much pressure and getting too anxious about things. And I do worry about if they've got that in the back of the mind, think, well, I make a mistake today, that's it, that's me dropped. It might not help. But yeah, it's situations around that which last season we probably win that game 1-0, 2-0 because we don't make those mistakes. Whereas this season we've made those mistakes. And as Cosy said, if we keep conceding 2 goals every game, we're not going to get many points, and we'll be Morecambe and Fleetwood. I said he's booking his holidays next season. But yeah, it's something that needs to get looked at, something that needs addressed. But it is interesting to look at the more intricacies of it. So I mean, the cold light of day and where things did go wrong.
We'll start whizzing through some of this now because we're finishing off the game and we've got to do school runs, etc., haven't we? But one thing I posed last night, and I'll pose it again very quickly, is do you think there's a certain attacking innocence around Mark Fotheringham? I said sort of naivety, didn't I, last night? And I don't really think it's naivety as such, but he's constantly talking about making sure he gets as many offensive players on the pitch as possible at all times. He's talking about 2 strikers, and then he's talking about Conor Mahoney, Dwayne Holmes, etc., Sorba Thomas. Do you think, to a certain point, he's maybe bringing, I mentioned this last night, but bringing a lemon to a knife fight in some ways, a great song by the Wombats. And the problem is if you're trying to go attacker versus attacker and you don't have the best attack in the league, you're putting a lot of pressure on that defence. And we saw Carlos Corberán last year was all about the defensive structure and the defensive shape. And Mark Fotheringham seems to prefer a more expansive balance, if you like. But if you're going away from home against anyone in the Championship and you're missing chances and you're leaving your back door unbolted, you're probably going to lose the game. And if you're in the bottom 3, sometimes you need to protect what you've got. I know Huddersfield fans won't like to hear us sticking 11 men behind the ball against Rotherham to win a point, etc. A lot of them won't accept that, and that's understandable. But to another point, we need as many points as we can. I'm talking point here, aren't I? But we need the points. We need a point at Rotherham. We need a win here. We need to scrape things. It's got to a point. I can't stop saying point. But it's got to a stage now where performances don't matter. We just need to make sure we're going upwards rather than sort of saying, we'll work on it next week, because that's not going to be good enough before too long.
No, well, not to labour the point. But Corberán was far more pragmatic and he was far more risk averse. Be that his tactical philosophy or be that looking at what he's got to use, his tools, his players, and designing a method that will work. Probably more the latter, to be honest. But it did work. And I think Town fans on paper would love to see far more expansive attacking football, like the Burnleys of this league, who have completely changed the way they play overnight. But it's then looking at the resources that you've got. Now, we do have attacking players, but ultimately, have we got enough attacking players that are going to get 2 or 3 goals? Because I think if this squad plays this way, it's going to need 2 or 3 goals to win a game. Because ultimately, the depth of quality that we've got in midfield and defensively at the moment isn't probably good enough to shore that out. Slightly lower on numbers as they were to last year. So I think it's just recognising where we are, what we need. We do need points. But also, going back to the point around potential naivety or innocence, Danny made a great point when we recorded last night, and I'll kind of just share it today, is the fact that in the Championship, sometimes you can be successful by just being harder, stronger, nastier, harder to beat. And maybe that's something that Fotheringham hasn't really necessarily come across in his coaching or managerial experience so far. I know the German Bundesliga is a little bit different. I think it's a bit more kind of tactical or how you play or attacking and nicer football. I think there is elements of that in the Championship, but I think very much it's been a bit more, bit more pointed, a bit more nous about you. Understanding how Rotherham's going to play and trying to be attacking and bring attacking players on against Rotherham isn't necessarily the right way to go. Like you say, we might not like that. We might not like to kind of shithouse the result as such, but sometimes it is the way it goes. And I think Corberán kind of got that. But he didn't get that straight away. It even took him time to get that, but he did get that eventually. And I do believe Fotheringham will kind of develop and change. But I do think there is a little bit of innocence there around what the championship is and what some of these teams will come and do and how successful it will be.
Yeah, so whenever I don't have a proper agenda, I always go to Twitter and ask for questions, and we've got a couple that come through. And the first one I've noted down is where Guy Bradley says, "Can we sort this awful defending out before it's too late?" And I think that just links in nicely to what we've been saying in that, the more open you become, and Mark Fotheringham talks about distances quite a lot rather than numbers, doesn't he, in terms of formation numbers and distances between players, and maybe there's too much distance at the minute between players because we are conceding goals, I know Hull didn't score against us, but they could have done. Estupiñán had a great chance, didn't he? And I think Nichols made a couple of good saves as well. Hull easily could have had a couple on another day. 3 against Luton, couple against Reading, couple yesterday, Saturday. I think there needs to be somewhat of a reining back of his attacking instincts, I think, at some stage, and we need to sort of maybe counter a little bit more and stay solid out of possession. But I'm sure things will start to sort themselves out the more time he has on the training pitch. And we can't really not talk about a game refereed by Jeremy Simpson and any controversy. We look back at previous notable performances by the Whopper with the Whistle. You look at Blackpool last year where Gary Medine elbows Tom Lees, almost knocks him out, and he plays on and tells Tom Lees to get up. The penalties you mentioned yesterday against Hull, the Corona ones inside the box, and the volleyball-style handball by Jacob Greaves. Me frothing 5 years ago away at Preston as Jordan Hugill elbowed Schindler 3 times without even conceding a free kick, which was scandalous back then. We've lost 10 out of the 16 games he's refereed, won 4. So I don't think he's consciously biased or unconsciously biased. I just think he's a terrible referee. And what we saw on Saturday was just another terrible decision by the worst referee in the Football League. And that's a stonewall penalty. I don't think we need to discuss it that much, do we? I think it's hard in the defender. Gets caught, Redoni gets in front of him and gets his leg tangled between him as he's about to shoot. It's a booking penalty and a chance to draw the game, which is probably a fair result. And it gets taken away from us by a complete Burke, to be blunt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I say, it just adds to the fact that there were those chances. We should have had a penalty. So again, it's a couple of strings to Fotheringham's point, I guess, what he's making earlier in his press conference. But just all around the game, Jeremy Simpson was poor. On both sides, there were fouls that Town players committed that just weren't given, weren't even looked at, and then he blew for things which weren't even a foul. And school players look around thinking, what's he even blown for? So you can get away with being consistently bad. You don't really necessarily notice that, but when he's consistently bad, consistently all over the place, it just, and you can see players actually getting visibly annoyed just because he was that poor. But we've just come to accept and expect that of Jeremy Simpson. Let's just hope he slides down the ladder. But unfortunately, seeing more and more championship referees of last season in the Premier League, I think it's only going to go higher and higher, unfortunately. But yeah, it's not great.
If only everybody was as good as the Madley brothers. Good solid lads then, Town fans. So we'll move on. This is Town's worst start to a season for 25 years away from home, with 6 not winning in 6 games. James Whittaker says, how worried should we be about our awful away form? I think a couple of tweaks and it's going to improve, but it's just whether Fotheringham wants to make those tweaks at the minute, really. But we'll see. Perhaps there's some games coming up where we could get things from, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. I'm slightly worried about the form in general and being 23rd, and Coventry having a couple of games in hand and a win and a good win away from overtaking us. That is concerning for me. And I think what's really concerning is that we've lost to Blackpool, Wigan, and Rotherham, 3 sides that I thought would be down there in the bottom 3 or around the bottom 3, and that is concerning. But we'll have to give Mark Fotheringham some time. He can't change everything after 4 games, and that leads on to the next one as well, which has come through from Briddlejuice Springsteen. And he says, based on his first 4 games, do you think Mark Fotheringham will do better post-World Cup when he's had more time to work with the players? And the answer to that, I think, is yes, providing he doesn't piss everybody off by then in the press conferences. No. So, yes, so I am worried about our form, but I'm hopeful that given time, he can arrest it.
I think we're quite lucky that we're in a season that we are clearly struggling. You make a point about what point you start to worry, but I think it's also recognising that where we are now means that for the next however many games we've got left, we need to win 2 or 3 or 4 games more than other teams. When you look at it like that, so we need to win 2 or 3 games more than Middlesbrough 2 or 3 games more than West Brom. It's not just been, we're only 6 points behind, that's only 2 games. It doesn't work like that. Teams will accrue points as we accrue points, but it's the fact that we need to accrue points more than other teams. And that's when it starts becoming a bit worrying. But we are fortunate that we do have effectively a closed season in the middle of the season, or roughly around halfway, where how many times have we seen teams finish season really well, have off season, go back into pre-season, start completely different. To be honest, we've kind of done that. So let's hope that we can use that time, and we will use that time. We're quite lucky to have it because it'll give us that break, to opportunity to reset, get some coaching, do a mini pre-season. I'm absolutely adamant that Fotheringham will have them working every single hour of every single day.
Christmas Day, won't
time.
Be pulling crackers maybe and not kicking football at the same time.
Maybe not in this country with a bit of warm weather, but certainly I think Christmas Day is the only day they'll have off. But they need it. But we're quite fortunate we've got that time, because other seasons that's not existed for teams. So it's in our gift to use that. I think we will use that, and hopefully we will come out the other side. And like Brady says, I think we will do, purely because we've got no option to. So we're quite lucky we do have that window of time in reality.
Okay, and also the January window is probably not as far away as it seems. I think we've got an owner, I think, who will push the boat out to try and keep us up, hopefully, whether that's with a couple of loans or not. Not sure, but I think there's a question on that quite shortly. The next question is from Lee Oates, and he says, do you think that we've never replaced Lewis O'Brien? We have players in midfield that have a lot of potential but are not consistent at this level yet. And do we have time to throw these players in? We need players that are ready now, need an experienced ball-playing central midfielder in January. I thought we were never going to be able to replace Lewis O'Brien. And, in particular, it's the dribbling stats and the second ball win duels that is just phenomenal at. Kasumu, you can half replace some of that, and Kamara to a point, with a lot of duels that they win, but nobody can then pick the ball up on the edge of the box and dribble to the edge of the opponent's box. It's, his dribbling skills was unbelievable last year, off the scale. He was, I think, 60 ahead of the next central midfielder for dribbles to the box. It was something like 90 odd to the next one was 30, and it just shows how far away he was, one of the best midfielders in the division at what he did, and we were never going to replace that unless we spent 10 million on a midfielder. So I was hopeful that we would then replace the blend in midfield, because I felt last year that we didn't quite have the right blend and function together. I felt like Lewis carried it a lot, but I don't really think we've done that either. I think we've gone out on... Most of my criticism of our January recruitment is that a lot of it seems to be based on players that will be good in 12 to 18 months, maybe 24 months, and we've neglected the here and now a little bit. John Russell struggling, which was always going to happen, to be honest, if we went from a defensive Carlos Corberán's shape system where he's quite well protected we'll go about distance, we'll talk Mark Fotheringham, we'll go distances again. And if you open up and go expansive and people have room to manoeuvre around John Russell, he's going to struggle because, mobility is not his strength at all. So do we have the right blend in midfield? No. We've been crying out for a ball-playing central midfielder since Aaron Moy left, and we were never going to replace Aaron Moy, but there's a man playing for Rotherham on Saturday who I thought was excellent, who I really wanted us to go out and spend money on in the summer, and it just didn't happen. How much Rotherham would want and how much we could spend, I don't know, but there's likes of him and Cameron Brannigan. I think Cameron Brannigan had a release clause for 750 grand in the summer, but he's since signed a new contract, and somebody like him from Oxford would have been fantastic. But yeah, I think we do lack a ball-playing central midfielder, and to rectify that in January is going to be a real struggle. I love Kamara and Kasumu as a combo. I think it's great. Ahead of them, Radoni hasn't quite done it for me yet. I know he's won the Blue and White Foundation Player of the Month, but I've not been quite as impressed as a lot of others. I think there's a lot of potential there, but I don't think he's really made a telling contribution in the final third yet. No goals, no assists, key passes not really very high, and that's what you want him to do. But he has been shunted back to play 8 rather than 10, so there are mitigating factors there. And the other question we had from Hannah Carr as well is, where does Hogg fit into Fotheringham's lineup once he's back fit? And for me, Hoggy can play a role. That Rotherham game was a very Jonathan Hogg game, wasn't it? You need Hoggy in there for games like that. And I think Hoggy can be used sparingly, can be used as much and as little as you like in the back three or in central midfield. And I think the good thing with Hoggy is he's got that experience and the plug and play ability, if you like, and I think he'll become quite key once he's fit. Where he's going to play, I'm not sure, because you can make an argument on a game-by-game basis, and I think that might be what we do, Johnny.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, like I say, it's tough to replace O'Brien. We kind of touched on last night that you kind of see a little bit where the club might have thought, well, we've got Kasumu, who, I mean, we didn't really get to see because he got, I mean, he kind of went off within 5 minutes of Burnley, and obviously kind of got Kamara, who's kind of come on this season. Again, if we'd replaced or brought some other players, we might not have seen as much of him, but it kind of leads into that experience and here if they're ready in now. And quite often with young players, maybe we're seeing this with Russell. We probably saw this with Thomas at the start of the season, though he's definitely turned it round. And we might see it with Kamara as we move forward into the season, that players will of that age and that experience will have kind of peaks and troughs. Similarly with Ben Jackson, you're not going to get someone who's going to play like Toffolo, who's kind of a 7 or plus every single game, because they are lacking experience and they will have ups and downs. And I feel that's where we are a little bit short. And it kind of leads into another question that I know we touched on last night, which was the blooding of the young players. Now there are too many players being blooded at this point in time. And we kind of said, really, that's on merit, because the young players that have come in have actually been some of the better performances this season. But if we had a couple of more experienced pros and a couple more championship players, they probably won't be relied on too much. So as much as there are positives there, it's also recognising that consistency is probably the biggest area of weakness for a younger player. And having someone who can come in and do the job around them is really crucial. And if you look at, if Kamara drops off it a little bit and Jackson drops off it a little bit, then we are back to being really, really short. And it's a gamble to rely on those players. And as much as it's fantastic, they've got the pathway currently. So I do think bringing a bit more experience, a bit more nous, like a Johnny Hogg, who equally can't play the game for the opposite reasons, is really key. So I think we are using young players well, but equally around the transfer window, that is something that needs to be looked at and addressed to make sure we're not relying on them too much at this early stages of their careers, really.
Yeah, there's two questions there that you've answered, really. One was Joel Pollard, who says, where do you think Fotheringham will want to strengthen the January transfer window, and do we think he will look into the German market? I'll quickly answer my point on that, which is the German market is going to be very difficult because of the new Brexit rules. So unless a German player becomes available who is playing in Bundesliga and not Bundesliga 2, it's going to be difficult to sign them due to the point system that's in place. So it's going to be difficult to get them, but they are attainable. And the Dutch league is of interest to Town at the minute, so they are watching the Dutch league quite carefully. So I did look for goal scorers in the Dutch league the other day, and no one's really banging any goals in who isn't playing for a top side. So maybe we won't unearth the next Joel Pirou, who knows. But yeah, so striker for me is where we need to strengthen. If he's playing two up front, you can't play Jordan Rhodes and Danny Ward for the next 20 odd games. It's not gonna happen. They'll break down. I wouldn't call them injury prone, but players the other side of 30, as we know from as I know from experience, do get more tweaks, tears, burnout than what somebody does younger. But we will get Simpson back at some point. Tino and Pat Jones will come back at a certain stage as well and can add to something up front or behind the striker. But I do think a striker and a ball-playing midfielder are quite key. And what also is key is getting that defence settled and organised, because that is really key to moving forward. And are we trying to blood too many young players? That came from Adam Bell. It's a difficult one, because if you look at the Rotherham game in isolation, and if you class Kasumu as a young player, and if Hoggy's playing instead of David Kasumu, he doesn't make that mistake for the first goal. He's done that a lot as Hoggy. He's made that mistake, but he doesn't then throw himself in and get caught like Kasumu does. He assesses the situation and backs off. And I think he also gets something on the cross coming in as well, because Hoggy's actually quite decent in the air for his size. So, and he probably notices the danger, but he doesn't have the speed of Kasumu. He doesn't break the ball as well as Kasumu or get to the second balls as well. So there are trade-offs, and it's about getting the blend right, I think, as much as anything. I think Ben Jackson's doing really well on the left-hand side. I wouldn't drop him for anybody at the minute that we've got. Other young players, I'm trying to think of who else there is really. Kamara, I think Kamara's probably been our best central midfielder in the last few weeks. So, no, I don't think we are, but we do need to make sure that we can rely on the experienced players, your likes of Rhodes, Ward, Hoggy, Hellick, Lees to do their job first and foremost. And I think if they're doing their job and organising properly, then I think the young players will fit in quite well around them and hopefully see a little bit more of Kane Kessler-Hayden, as long as he's not taking his bat and ball home. So we'll there's hopefully more things to come. I think we've run out of time, Johnny, because I need to go to pick the young one up from school. But the last thing we thought last night, what would be quite interesting. So it's Cozzy who sparked this really by sending a random WhatsApp message to us in the group. And do you know what? I'm going to play it now. And it's his Mark Fotheringham impression. Mark Fotheringham.
If you don't do the training, you'll not get in my team. I don't care if you're Jordan Rhodes on the big money or Eddie and Kamara getting full. If you don't do the training, you won't get in my team.
So there you go. A little bit more Mrs. Doubtfire than Mark Fotheringham, I think. A little bit ropey towards the end, but I thought it was quite a decent effort. And we were talking to Danny last night, and we thought, do you know what would be quite good? Is if we all do some kind of Mark Fotheringham impression, and then Danny can, as the trained thespian of the group, could sort of say which one's the best, and maybe we'll have a competition of sorts. And Johnny, yesterday you peaked with yours, didn't you? I don't know if you can repeat yesterday's antics.
Yeah, accents at my strong point. But by all accounts, it was quite good last night. So when the recording failed, I was a little bit devastated, really. But I will give it another go. The 12 hours of time haven't helped me practice anymore. But listen, if you're done, put 100% done. I've messed that up. I'll go again. Listen, you only play for me if you don't put 100% on the training field.
That's not bad. That is definitely Sir Alex Ferguson.
It was better
style,
yesterday.
It's not bad.
Like I say, it's just a tribute.
Obviously, very good. And you heard mine at the start. So I would like it if people send their terrible Mark Fotheringham impressions into us, and what we'll do is we'll get Danny to judge who's done the best. I think this has got legs, and I hope Mark Fotheringham doesn't listen to this. But one thing we do in Yorkshire, Mark, is if we rib you or take the mickey a little bit with stuff like this, it means we like you. So it's definitely a good thing that we're doing this. It means you're accepted. You are one of us now, and it was good to see him and his family buzzing about the town fans singing his name. Mark Fotheringham's by my army and away at Rotherham and at home against Hull. So it's good to see he's settling in, which is good. And speaking of settling in, I think that's us settling in for this episode. Sorry, the original one got ransacked by my idiocy, shall we say, but it happens. And thanks for joining in. And we may be back for the Preston game after on Twitter Spaces. To be honest, it just depends really, doesn't it, if we get whacked or not. If we get absolutely walloped by Preston, there's no way I'm going on Spaces right after the game to talk about it. So, providing we don't get hammered, we probably should appear on Tuesday night, and we'll catch you all then.
There's a team that is dear to its followers. The colours are bright blue and white. They're a team of renown, and they're the pride of the town. And the game of football is their delight. And all the while upon the field of play, thousands loudly cheer them on the way. Often you can hear them say, who can beat the town today? And then the bells will ring so merrily, and every goal shall be a memory. So town, play up and bring that cup back to Huddersfield. So town, play up and bring the cup back to Hildred.